over the last year and a half-ish, is someone that I consider one of the OGs of Chicago tech. And she's the founder and CEO of 2 different companies and now is on her 3rd venture. So I just want to say welcome, Desiree. I'm really glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I kind of give like a very high level perspective of you, but I'd love for you to talk about who is Desiree?
That's a big question. Hopefully I can answer it in the time that we have, but I think I'll just start kind of from my roots and how I got started in the startup community. So I was born in Costa Rica. I'm half Latinx, moved to Kansas City when I was very young and grew up there and was raised by a single mom. And honestly, I think that experience, reflecting back now as a founder for 12 years, had a lot more to do with my companies than I ever realized. And so I think at the core of what I do is I help solve problems of isolation. And I'll talk a little bit about that now with my 2 startups. But my first startup was a company called GiveForward. I launched that in 2008 with my co-founder, Ethan Austin. And really, it was inspired partially by Hurricane Katrina. I was working at the Kauffman Foundation at the time, and I had this kind of aha moment that in 2005, 2006, people weren't able to give to each other on the internet. So we built the first crowdfunding platform. And now in the days of GoFundMe and Kickstarter, Indiegogo, it seems impossible. There was a time that didn't exist, but back in the day it didn't. And so, building that for the first time in a city like Chicago, where we didn't have much of a network, neither Ethan nor I, was its own challenge. And I'm happy to talk about that. And then the second company, Pearachute, really helps busy parents identify and connect with activity providers to help enrich their children's lives. And on the other side of that marketplace are the solopreneur, artists, athletes who are running these businesses partially altruistically to help inspire the next generation of passionate athletes and artists and readers and thinkers who are running their businesses without the support system that traditional tech startups get. So I love solving problems like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then even before that, I remember when I first met you, when I was waiting for you, I was on your LinkedIn and I was like, oh wow, she went to Yale. I mean, everyone that I've gotten to meet some people that were from Yale and Harvard, and it's like, I'm always curious and interested in how that experience was, just because it is Ivy Leagues, right? So how did going to Yale play into you wanting to be a founder?
That's a great question. I would argue in the beginning it didn't at all. I think when you are the daughter or son of an under-resourced family, which I definitely was, we were low middle income for sure. My mom didn't go to college until I went to college. And so I think there was a lot of emphasis on higher education being the ticket to a brighter future. And so all of my energy as a teen went into, making sure I got good grades and that I was in the right clubs and doing the right sports so that I could get into a great college. And then I did. And I was like, now what? I have no idea what to do here. And everyone here is brilliant. And so honestly, it's actually a pretty good foundational exposure to imposter syndrome, which I think people face throughout their careers and lives. But when you are, a poor kid going to a wealthy school surrounded by wealthy people, I think, you figure out how to fit in and be your authentic self in a way that is unique. And so honestly, I actually think it was a great lifting off point for me kind of emotionally, but from a professional standpoint, not so much. So I really struggled to figure out what I wanted to study and do after school. I wrote my senior essay on corporate social responsibility in Latin America. And so I really fell in love with what these small companies were doing in supply chain around sustainability. In 2003, 2004, that wasn't really being talked about. And it was hard for me to get a reader at Yale. And so I felt very actually kind of disconnected from my future there. But socially and intellectually, I loved it. It wasn't really a launching pad for entrepreneurship. Since though, the Yale Entrepreneurial Society has grown so much in their entrepreneurship track within their business school, and now their undergraduate but courses are really developed. So I'm sure for budding entrepreneurs there now, it's probably a better fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we do share that from our past, because I just remember, growing up poor / very lower middle class, and my parents, and especially because I'm South Indian, the whole thing is education is the key to everything, education and hard work. So it was I had to figure out a way to go to college. I obviously didn't go to Yale, but NIU, but it was I had to figure out a way to go to college and figure out how I'm going to pay for it or whatever. So you mentioned something that I'd like to talk about a little bit is that imposter syndrome, because I think now that term, people are using it more, but even after Harvard, being in tech, especially, 15 years ago, there weren't many women at all. It was all mostly white male dominated, or at least male dominated. Tell me about that. How was that in tech? Like, how was that when you first started?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think one thing that being around money when you're young does for you, if you don't come from money, is it helps you navigate it and have a little bit of distance from the competitive game that I think other people are playing. And that does actually play a factor in tech and in fundraising. So, when you are an early stage founder and you have friends who are also early stage founders and they're raising $5 million or $10 million, it's kind of easy to get down on yourself about not being able to do that, especially when you're in an industry like consumer back in the day, or social venture, which is where I was, initially. Those are harder to fund categories, especially here in Chicago. So, that kind of built-in comfort with being around different levels of wealth kind of was already in my life. And I think that definitely helped. And also, just to be honest, I mean, I know this is true about our ecosystem. When you have a Yale or a Harvard on your resume, or a Stanford, or a CS degree from Berkeley, it's part of the pattern recognition of pedigree that investors are comfortable with. And so I know that while the business I was creating wasn't familiar for a lot of investors, my background did seem familiar, and that probably opened more doors than would have if I'd gone to another school. So I'm very aware of that. And it's also a big factor in what I'm working on now, because I realize, the importance of diversity of thought and the diversity of background that goes into the problems to be solved for, the 99% of America that isn't the VC community and their problem set is that they understand. If we can help change pattern recognition for investors, both angel and venture capitalists, then we're going to see a lot more diverse founders getting funded in Chicago. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah. And I think especially after everything that happened last year, there's even more of a focus on that. And, we can talk about what you're doing right now and how that goes into it. But so obviously the first company that you founded, you just kind of talked about the mission for GiveForward and for Pearachute. But so you start the company, you're raising money, you're building the business, but you're a female founder, a female CEO, even though Chicago isn't, the West Coast or East Coast, it was still coming up, especially at that time, right? I guess what was the feeling that was going through you when you were either pitching or as you're leading your teams, being a woman, but not just being a woman, but being Latinx?
Yeah, I'm very aware that I present as white. And so, I don't know that being Latin was a huge factor, to be perfectly honest. But I recognize that it is for some of my Latinx peers. And so I want to be very mindful of what I know to be a privilege in some of these settings. But being a woman, the funding numbers are almost identical. The percentage of funding going to women and the percentage of funding going to people of color. And so I do think that we share an experience, and I do, in that intersectionality. When we were first starting GiveForward, we were told our business was not fundable, that it looked too much like a nonprofit. And so that rejection early on from investors and from the investment community was one that I just was like, okay, well, fine, that's just not our track. We have to find a different way. But when Techstars, or it was called Accelerate Labs, first launched in Chicago in 2010, I'd heard of incubators because of my work at the Kauffman Foundation at the earliest stage of my career. And so Ethan and I applied thinking, we probably won't get funding, but at least it'll be good PR if we get in. And we just were so lucky that Sam Yegan, who is founder of OkCupid and later CEO of Match.com and now CEO of ShopRunner, was leading the program that year and had just solved the problem manually for one of his employees, by creating a blog with a PayPal button. So it was such a serendipitous moment that we got in, but it was also the first time that we got kind of external validation on our idea in a scaled way, if that makes sense. And so getting into that accelerator, the first really major accelerator in Chicago, was a big milestone for us. And also I think for me as a woman founder. But it didn't save us from, struggling to raise money later. And it really wasn't until David Cohen from Techstars corporate, the main Techstars, said he was going to invest, that we started to see just the domino effect of being able to get more investors. And so that's why it's just so critical that our city finds a way to help lead rounds for diverse founders, women, LGBTQ, and people of color, because we are at a disadvantage, and the barriers to entry for us are already high, but then the barriers to funding are even that much higher. So it was definitely a challenge. And it was interesting also from a hiring perspective. I did have a male co-founder on the first business. So I had someone in the room that felt familiar to some of these male investors. But when I was interviewing candidates, especially for tech, I had several people tell me I've never worked for a woman before. I don't know how this is going to go. And I was okay, well, we're 50% of the population. So I hope at some point you will figure out a way to work for a woman. I mean, some of those that we hired, one of them we hired, the other ones didn't, and that one didn't end up working out. Hopefully since then they've, learned how to work for a woman, but it was an interesting place to be for sure.
What about other women? Like while you were building this, like, how did you build a network with other women?
Yeah. I mean, building a company in Chicago in 2008 through 2012 was actually a lonely prospect, no matter who you were. There just wasn't, there wasn't 1871. There was Tech Cocktail, which was kind of one-off events to get people together, but there wasn't a strong ecosystem. So I'm going to say that across the board, it was pretty isolating. But going through Techstars opened me up to a group of women that I wouldn't have, easily found otherwise, including Genevieve Thiers, who started Sitter City, Amanda Lannert, who well from Jellyvision, Suzanne Mushin was, someone that came in and gave us advice early on. So Thea Polonsik from Clear Space, who was one of our executive coaches and really helped define our culture as a company. So I did get, some early intros to women there. And then over my career, I've just been very proactive about making sure that I have, peer mentorship in the form of helping other women that are at my stage, and then all attention to how I can help lift women up that are, a couple of stages behind me, helping them hopefully avoid some of the mistakes that I made.
Got it. And then, you talked about raising money, and I can't, I need to ask, and I want people to hear about your experience with Shark Tank.
Yeah. It's a once in a lifetime kind of crazy opportunity for sure. So we got on Shark Tank in kind of an atypical way. We announced our launch for Pearachute, my second company, through TechCrunch. And so right after that article came out, we got a phone call and an email from the producers of Shark Tank saying, hey, we've been looking at your space for a while. We'd love for you to do an interview and see if you're a good fit for Shark Tank. And we actually didn't think we were, because, we're not a widget. Pearachute was an online marketplace for kids' activities, I think I mentioned. Yeah. So it is not something you typically see on Shark Tank, right? And especially since we were only in Chicago at that point, we weren't nationwide. Yeah. But we kept making it through the process. And so we kept, just like, okay, let's try it out, let's go. And then we got invited to record, and it was a pretty, incredible, stressful, once in a lifetime experience. I don't recommend it for every founder. You have to have quite a bit of fortitude, personally, emotionally. My recording was 90 minutes and they shrink it down to 9. So a lot can happen in those moments, and an emotional roller coaster, but I'm glad I did it. I'm proud of myself for doing it. And, ultimately on screen, we got a deal with Mark Cuban. Didn't end up going through, but it was a great it was a great platform for us to share what we were working on.
Huh. Yeah. I think a lot of people are I could watch that show forever, just at home. And I think sometimes, and I didn't understand it when I first started watching it, that it actually took 90 minutes.
Well, they're not all that long. Some of them are very fast. Ours just was long. So
yeah, but I've heard that from different people that they were there for like an hour to an hour and a half, and obviously it gets shrunken down. But I just think it's really cool and exciting. And the team at Packback, they're the only other Chicago company I know that's been on Shark Tank. And I know there's another one that recently was on there, but you don't see too many.
A few. I think Spikeball, right, is from here. So
I never heard of them actually.
No, it's fun. You can buy them anywhere. Target, Walmart. It's like a game that you play outside or inside, I guess.
So now let's go to where you're at right now and what you're doing.
Great. Yeah. So as you can imagine, a worldwide pandemic and a kids activity platform don't really go together. So we have put Pearachute on hold, or in a holding pattern. There's still providers on the platform and definitely parents still booking things, but I stepped away from the day-to-day, and we have other people running it for a couple of reasons. One was that I've had this broad range of experience as a founder. I bootstrapped for a while. I went through an accelerator. We raised our Series A from First Round Capital and Founder Collective, so two of the biggest names in financing. We did a strategic round from Nationwide Insurance. I raised venture debt. Then with Pearachute, equity crowdfunding. I had a very nice note from seasoned investors early on. So the fact that I've had all these different funding experiences as a founder, and then really being married to a police officer in Chicago, I've been witness to the social injustice that we've had for a decade, not just over the summer. But this summer, it made me realize, okay, where do my skills intersect with my ability to make change? And I just really felt inspired by the opportunity to bring entrepreneurship more intentionally to our South and West sides and to our Black and Latinx founders who have been continuously ignored by our existing funding tracks. So P33 is an organization here in Chicago, in part started by Penny Pritzker and then Chris Gladwin and Kelly Walsh from Civic Committee to figure out how do we make Chicago an innovation hub, looking at deep tech and quantum as an opportunity, looking at our unique makeup of our city and the talent that we have here, both from like retention and acquiring new talent. And then also, how do you become an innovation hub without being a really thriving tech startup ecosystem? And just a little story on our ecosystem, we've grown our startup community by like 300% over the last decade, but we still only have 1.9% of funding going to Black and Latinx founders.
You're talking about Chicago.
Chicago, and the national average is 2.4, which is also terrible, but we're 30% Black, 30% white, 30% Latinx. There's no reason our numbers should be so low. So P33 is leading an initiative called Tech Rise, and I'm very lucky to be able to be running that. And so we're building a pre-seed fund that is non-dilutive grants to help replace that friends and family round of funding that happens typically for white investor or white founders through their personal networks or their friends. That money just isn't necessarily in most people of color's network. So we're helping try to replace that with pitch competitions that are launching in late spring. And then we also have an online community that we're building specifically to support Black and Latinx founders from idea stage all the way to exit.
I think that's a great idea, because when you're, especially, and this is just me talking personally, like when I was after the George Floyd thing happened, I wanted to highlight Black business leaders in Chicago that I know, and I thought it was going to be easy. I was like just looking at my Orion 3 group, and I was like, oh my God,
I don't have enough. Yeah.
And I was like, it was actually Amanda Lannert that introduced me to Gary Cooper, and then my buddy Tom Kirby that introduced me to Ablorde, and it's Amanda introduced me to my friend Claude, now my friend Claude too. So it's just been, you think it's there, but it's not. So I love what you guys are doing, and I think it's so important.
And I mean, I love that you just listed 3 examples of men that have done an amazing job of building their businesses here in Chicago. But I do want to point out the fact that all 3 of them are friends and in my network too. They do share a similar pedigree to their white counterparts. And part of it's that they're male, but part of it is, one of them has a PhD from University of Chicago. Another one has been a VC. And, where I think that we have the opportunity to get even better at what we've already started to make some progress on is identifying the unique problems that diverse founders are solving, right? When you're a first-time founder, you solve problems that you understand personally. And so usually that's consumer or related to the businesses that you've run. And it doesn't always line up with the way that investors have understood the problems that are worth solving. So I'm really excited about this work. And I'm so excited that we have so many corporate partners coming in, because I think that there's a real desire among corporate Chicago to be able to be more meaningfully involved in our startup ecosystem. And nearly everyone, I think, since George Floyd, but obviously even started before, recognized the importance of narrowing the wealth gap in our city, increasing, the talent pipeline of the diverse talent pool, and thinking about how do we create sustainable businesses that earn the contracts that these corporate partners can offer. So I feel like we're at the very beginning of something that's going to be really collaborative and exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it like, again, personally for me, from that experience, I just realized that you need to have intention when you're doing something like that, because it's easy to assume or, have perceptions, but until you sit down and look at the cold facts and look at the data and then be intentional about what you want to do, you're not gonna, I don't think the deal's gonna get, I don't think the job's gonna get done. But so that's why I love what you're doing. So
thank you. And just one more data point on that, if you wanted some data, if we increase the number of startups in this city by 20% a year over the next decade, we would create 170,000 new jobs related to those startups. But if we made sure that 20% growth happened with diverse founders, we would be creating 170,000 high income jobs for diverse tech talent, which is just massive in terms of the ripple effect to communities. So it's actually not a very big lift. 20% is nothing. It just requires additional funding and more intentionality, like you said.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't think about it like that, but that makes so much sense. So Desiree, when I always ask everyone for this series, especially because I'm intentionally, purposely picking women.
Thank you.
Right, women founders, and rather than, and I'm even with that group of women founders, I'm trying to find people from diverse backgrounds. Not just race, but just backgrounds in general. So, and the last question I ask everyone is, what advice do you have for women or younger girls that want to start their own business?
Yeah, great question. I think that when you have an idea for a business, it's actually quite hard to figure out how to get started because there's no playbook out there. There's no like one website where you go to and it tells you step by step what to do. And so I would say that the most important thing that you can do when you're starting a business is to find a network of mentors. And it doesn't have to be someone who's done what you want to do. It's someone who has expertise in one area of the business that you want to build, and start asking them if they'll give you, an hour a month, or, 20 minutes a week, or whatever it is, so that you can kind of riff on your idea early on. Because the more you can just bring your idea to the world and share it with people, and that they can ask questions and they can tell you what some of the risks are that they see, the faster you can get a crystallized idea of what your business will be, what your revenue model will be, and you'll be better prepared to take on some of the opportunities that we have here in our city, like the pre-accelerator training that happens at a lot of our incubators, or then going directly into an incubator, or applying for some grant funding. So really, I think the faster you can get that pool of network mentors together that can help you with different areas of your business idea, the better.
So grant funding, right? Honestly, I didn't really know there was that much of it that existed. Tell me a little bit about that. What exactly is it, and what's like a easy high level way of just saying, instead of going into details, like how do you even get that?
So there actually isn't that much. That's part of the problem. And I think that's what a lot of us are working on. So we recognize that, if your personal network and your personal savings isn't adequate to help you get to a minimum viable product, which is what you usually need to be able to go pitch investors, then we're basically missing the entire top of the funnel for anyone who's under-resourced, which means they can't trickle down into the rest of the funding ecosystem, and will never scale, not never, but are unlikely to scale a tech business without some additional support. So there are several of us that are thinking of creative ways to make friends and family round of funding happen in non-dilutive ways, so that it's low risk for the founders, and there's no expectation of return for investors. So it's more of a philanthropic piece. The Tech Rise Fund is definitely one that you can contribute to. It's completely tax deductible. But then I know that there also are some efforts that are happening in other areas of the city, and I'm happy to share more on that as they come together on our platform.
Awesome. Well, obviously I'm going to tag you on this on LinkedIn, and I'll probably put your contact info on the other social media channels that they could reach you at, especially as it pertains to, because I know there's going to be people that might watch this that are thinking about starting their own business and whatnot. So
we do the real one more plug, if I could. We have an online Slack community for Black and Latinx founders and those who want to support Black and Latinx founders. So feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I'll be tagged in this video, hopefully, and I'm happy to add you to our community.
That would be awesome. That's a great idea. So thanks for bringing that up. But thank you for being you. Thank you for like everything that you've done. Seriously, like it's actually, I feel so, one of the best things about the last 3 years and like working downtown is like, I've been able to meet some incredible people that have done some really impressive things, and you're definitely one of them. So yeah, I appreciate you doing this, and I'm grateful that the city has someone like you.
Thank you. Well, we're lucky to have you. You really are leading the charge in terms of making sure that we get visibility as founders and as people that are doing things in our community. So thank you for this platform.
Oh, shucks. Now you got me blushing.
Cheers to you. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Desiree.